Hello everyone, Jason from Truth Behind the Magic here. Glad to see you all again. This video is going to be a bit different than what I usually put out, but still it's going to fall within the Disney theme, and even though it is like a financial video per se, I'm mainly going to be using that as a backdrop to talk about issues within the company and ways that I think they can capitalize on things to improve things going forward. But a couple weeks ago, the fourth quarter financial report as well as the annual report came out, and as someone who recently purchased Disney stock, I definitely noticed the immediate shift downwards after this came out. The stock price dropped about $10 in a day. Actually, I think it was $12 within like a couple days, and that's a pretty significant shift considering the price of Disney stock. And it wasn't like it was a particularly bad report. I would just say it was mediocre, because even though in a lot of things they say that no news is good news, really when it comes to finance, no news is bad news, of course, in many cases. But nothing earth-shatteringly bad. In fact, the yearly revenue did increase from $91.4 billion to $94.4 billion. And even though that is an increase, so it's technically good, it's not very significant, because really that could just simply boil down to inflation, with it being that small of an increase. Now, I do understand that Disney is at such a large scale that it's really hard to get an exponential increase when you're talking about billions like that, but still, that's fairly mediocre. Income before taxes did increase to $12 billion from $7.6 billion. Now that is definitely significant. That's a positive improvement for sure. But despite that improvement, I believe the sudden decrease in stock price is mainly due to concerning trends that are being observed within the company, especially when you look at the fourth quarter report, and I'll also mention the third quarter report a little bit in here. I will kind of preface this by saying I'm not going to go over everything like bullet point by bullet point in the report, just because I don't want to bore anyone to death here. But I'm just going to mention a lot of the big numbers here and kind of my take on a few of the things. But some of these trends that people have been observing, and I guess some of this is kind of like hearsay, but I mean, it's first-person accounts of things too. But there have been a lot of first-person reports that have been repeatedly saying the theme parks feel far more empty than usual, and that's really been a trend for a couple of years now, but just the past few months is when I've really been seeing a lot about it. But despite those observations, the operating income for the parks, specifically the parks experiences and products division as a whole, increased by $723 billion to a number of $10 billion for the annual reports. And even though, once again, that's good that it's an increase, I don't know that it necessarily pertains to the parks specifically that much, because once again, you could attribute some of that to inflation, just generally rising prices in the parks, which have historically outpaced inflation by, I can't remember the exact number. I think it was up to 10 times or something at one point, like no joke. I think that's what I did a report last year, and I should have checked up on that before making this, but I didn't even think to discuss that. But Disney inflation in the parks has at times just outpaced inflation by insane amounts. But anyway, inflation, rising prices in the parks, and the availability of significantly more cruises because of the new ships that they've been introducing, I think is a big part of that. And they even mentioned that in the report is something that they think is aiding that increase in operating income. But really, even though the parks tend to be where I make most of my complaints, I really think entertainment is where Disney faces the current struggle, the largest struggle at the moment. Because even though the report did show an annual operating income increase of 19% for the entertainment segment, the quarter four numbers specifically showed a substantial decrease from the year over income of 35% down from the previous year. And that also follows the third quarter report, which entertainment was down 15% year over. So even though overall things are looking good in the annual report, the last 6 months or so are showing a pretty significant downward trend, especially in the entertainment division. And I think that's why, a big reason why the stock price has been going down, because I mean, it's kind of hard to like argue which division of Disney is like the bread and butter per se of the company. In fact, the parks were like the big, well, if you go way back, of course, the entertainment, the films especially, was the big money generator for the company for decades, until the parks became such a big thing. Then the parks kind of took that over for a while. But with the acquisition of Fox and Marvel and all that, recently the entertainment division has taken the lead a little bit in terms of revenue, at least. I still think I would consider like the parks the bread and butter for Disney at the moment. But they really need to be careful with the entertainment sector, because things are slipping in the wrong direction. And that's really a good segue into, I guess, kind of the second part of the video, because the first part was more based on just reporting the numbers. But I kind of want to segue into what I think Disney is doing wrong and what they should try to do to improve their overall situation. And I'll go straight into entertainment. And what I believe is causing the quarterly numbers to go down, and really just in general the overall feeling of quality of entertainment from Disney to go down, is that they appear to be committed to releasing movies that are almost destined for failure, as I would say. And it's just mind-boggling. Snow White is the perfect example of this. The movie should have ceased production and never been released as soon as just controversy after controversy began to pile up. And I'm not one who thinks everything should be canceled. I don't think that's a good mindset. But when it's a situation like that, where the controversies just keep coming, keep piling up, and literal millions of fans are complaining and saying they're not going to support the film for a variety of reasons, it may be better off to just actually listen to the fans for once and cut your losses and cease production on the movie. Because a lot of the controversies with that film came out pretty early in the production process. It wasn't like it was a month before it came out or anything. And Disney lost substantial money on that movie. And that kind of ties in with another point I have, where I just think in general, Disney needs to dial back the obsession with the live action remakes. Some of them are good, some of them not so much. I think, especially in terms of what's about to come out, I think that making a Moana live action movie only about a decade after the original movie came out, and they're still like riding high on the sequel that just came out, it's just a bit odd to me to release a live action remake of that at the moment. I'm certainly not saying it wouldn't do well. I'm sure it will, because people do love that franchise. I just think it's not the time for it. It's not the time to be spending hundreds of millions of dollars to make a remake of a movie that just came out, practically. In the grand scheme of things, is it still a new movie? Makes no sense. And really, just for the live action movies in general, I'm not necessarily saying they should completely stop making them, because some of them definitely are enjoyable. Lilo and Stitch may have honestly been better than the animated movie. I know that's a controversial statement, but I think a couple of the castings were not that great. That's probably what would put it still below the original one potentially, but overall it might be better. But I just think the amount of money they're spending on these live action remakes might be hurting their efforts in other departments, especially feature animation, which should really be the primary focus of the studio. It historically has been. It really still should be. If they didn't release original movies that were flop after flop out of the animation studio, then they wouldn't have to focus so much on other things. But really, barring the sequel movies, the new movies that come out of Disney Animation have just been mediocre, if not outright pitiful, in recent years. I mean, you have people coming out and saying that one of them was created by AI, or written by AI, I should say. So when you've reached that point, that's pretty much bottom of the barrel. Not saying that they did that, but at least when you're getting accusations of that, it's pretty much bottom of the barrel. But it's not just the Disney Animation either. It's Pixar, who I think is essentially the bedrock of Disney productions, and basically carried the company for probably a decade or more, is not free from criticism either. Many fans have really felt for the past 5 years or more that Pixar has become stagnant when it comes to their releases. People are tired of the animation style they keep using. It's actually nicknamed Bean Mouth animation, or the Cal Art style, because their mouths literally are like bean shaped. And they just keep doing it movie after movie. And then on top of that, you have a Pixar executive who outright came out and said he essentially blamed the fans for the original movies flopping because he said stop asking for originals if you're not going to go see them. It's not the fans' fault that they're not paying and go spending their well-earned money and time to go see original films that are coming out. It's not the fans' fault. It's simply because the sequels that are coming out are from franchises that we know are entertaining. They've already proven themselves as high quality, and they each have a unique animation style and look. Like, you think about Toy Story, Incredibles, I mean, going back a little bit because there hasn't been a new one in a while, but Monsters, Inc. would be another one. Finding Nemo, that franchise. They're each unique. They look different from each other. I mean, they're so different from each other that you would honestly not even know they're from the same animation studio if you didn't know about Pixar. But you contrast that to something like Elio, which it was really not a bad movie, but it was just simply uninspiring, or at least that's how it was portrayed to the public, because the animation style was that bean mouth animation that's been used for the last 5 years or whatever of Pixar films. And the trailer did a horrific job of explaining what the movie was actually about and what was going on. I watched the movie and I was like, I didn't think this was the plot at all. But it just didn't do anything to make people want to go see the movie, I don't think. It was just the same old, same old. And Pixar does still make incredible movies, especially the sequels. I mean, quite literally incredible. The Incredibles 2 was very good. But I think they need to return back to the old, what I would call the old Pixar philosophy, where every movie is unique to itself. It looks different from the other movies. It sets its own style. It's really just defined in its own way. It doesn't look like anything else. And I think Elemental is a great example of that, because even though it does use that Cal Art style animation for the most part, you can't really tell because the characters aren't humans. And that's another thing. I think Pixar releases way too many movies in the past few years that are based around human characters, and that is something that is kind of making them all seem alike as well. Because, I mean, you look back in the old days, there may have been some humans in some of those movies, but they really weren't the main focus of it. You didn't see them a lot. Everything just looked so unique. It was its own world, and that's why Elemental, which did fairly well compared to some of the other recent ones, I think that's why it did well, because it was a unique, original, fantastical world. And just overall, I think Disney Entertainment needs to return to the mindset of making quality movies with the only objective and driving factor being to make fun shows and movies that are for the entire family. No agenda, nothing bubbling under the surface in terms of reasons that they're making the movie for some other reason. It just needs to be providing family-friendly, fun entertainment. They've somehow forgotten that entire aspect. But moving on to the parks, which, like I said, are not really the focus of this, which typically the parks are the place that get railed on the most because things have fallen into disrepair. People feel like things are outdated in certain cases, that things are just outright bad in certain attraction cases. But I really feel like for the first time in years, I mean, maybe the first time since I have been an adult and have kind of been following the company, doing the Disney College program, that kind of thing, I feel like for the first time, Disney is moving in the right direction when it comes to the parks. Rides have been getting much needed major refurbishments. You look at what they did to Test Track, which people were asking for, fans were certainly asking for, but Disney didn't have to do that. I mean, Test Track was still a very well-liked attraction, one of the best attractions at Epcot, most popular attractions. I mean, maybe that's just because it's Epcot. No slander intended, but that's just kind of how it is when you have a thrill ride there. But it wasn't something they had to do per se, but they did it because they were trying to please the fans. Like, that's one of the times I genuinely think they listened to the fans. You have major expansions and updates that are coming to multiple parks, especially at Disney World. Over the next few years, those are going to be rolled out. And it really it feels like they are finally starting to listen to the fans again, which would truly be a great thing if that's what they're beginning to do. And if they really want to cap it off big time, they can debut the grand return of Fast Pass and get rid of the Lightning Lane garbage. But overall, as I've said in previous videos, I believe Disney holds the capacity to have what I've been calling a second renaissance if they play their cards right. 2027 and 2028 are pretty much guaranteed to be huge years for the theme parks once all of the new areas and attractions are up and running. Entertainment is, I think, the wild card here, assuming that they do follow through with all the theme park things. Entertainment is going to be the real wild card. Because it's going to be a huge part of that renaissance. Because you look back at the original Disney Renaissance, and the movies are seen as the bedrock of that entire thing, which I think is generally true as far as expanding Disney as a brand. You had Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, big time stuff. But it wasn't just the films. I mean, that's when Disney World exploded in size. You had 2 theme parks that were open during that period. A bunch of resorts were opened. And it's going to be an entire company effort. But entertainment, I think, is the biggest thing that needs to be improved right now. Because I think if they improve on that, it can reach a lot more people than the theme parks, and I think you really have the chance to win over millions of fans who may have essentially walked away from the company in recent times if you return the film efforts to what they once were. And I think as long as Disney actually listens to the fans and makes a genuine effort to, first of all, focus on the happiness of the cast members who work there, because the happiness of the cast members translates directly to guest satisfaction. You have to start with the cast. I know that might sound counterintuitive to, like, the customer comes first and everything, but the customer does come first if you put the cast members first. And 2, focus on pleasing the fans That needs to be the really big ticket item, is listen to the fans again. Try to deliver what they're asking for, not things nobody asked for, because that seems to be the case a lot recently. But if they do this well, I mean, they really could experience an exciting and lucrative, for the shareholders and company, but an exciting and lucrative period of time over the next decade or more. I mean, who knows how long it could go on. But they need to improve their public image. It does seem like they're kind of changing the way they're doing things in a positive manner. Bringing back Fast Pass, like I said, would be a big deal. Bringing back the Magical Express would be a big deal. But they really have a chance to do something special here. And I'm hoping that maybe this last quarterly report will be the last one that really shows negative signs. I don't really have faith in that, but not even just as a shareholder who wants the stock price to go up, but just in general, I want the company to really become something that Walt would be proud of again, because I think it's been a long time since that was the case. But anyway, that'll be it for this video, and I'll see you next time.